and welcome back to On the Fly. Here we're in part 8 of our Gateway to Gold series. Today's topic will be Team Switzerland. So obviously with the Swiss, gold medals are not necessarily in the hopes for this year's tournament. Aside from that, to be fair, they don't have that much of a shot compared to teams like the US, like Canada, like Russia. And I'll be completely honest, I don't even see them getting out of the qualification stage because they got to beat out a team like Russia, a team like the Czechs, and to be fair, even a team like Denmark might be a sneaky candidate to surpass the Swiss team. So overall with Switzerland, they're going to really rely on their sort of own league. It's the National League. It's going to be one of these leagues that sort of will help them. They might cost them. It's just sort of a matter of what ends up happening. I could definitely see that league sort of being the make or break. Obviously, they're not going to be completely drawing off NHL players, although there will be quite a few of them coming from the end all the way to the Swiss Olympic team. But it still remains to be seen sort of where they'll end up. I am curious to see sort of how they end up doing, because I think they don't stand much of a shot against some of the bigger teams, but they definitely do have a shot to get through the quarterfinals. To be honest, I could see them beating out at some of the top teams, some of the better teams. But overall, I don't see them making it far. I think a team like Canada, a team like the US will pretty much obliterate them. There's not too much of a debate there. But of course, still remains to be seen, and it will be interesting to see sort of how they end up there. So we'll take a look at the depth chart, starting with the forwards, with the left wingers. So from the NHL, you got Timo Meier, Kevin Fiala, Nino Niederreiter. You got Krasov, and you got Bayerski. And then from the National League, you got Furman. So once again, that sort of National League is going to be very much relied upon. Obviously, there aren't a lot of NHL guys, and many of them are sort of borderline guys, some of them fourth line guys that play every other night, not even. So it will be interesting to see sort of how they move along. And because of that, once again, it's sort of a team to watch, whether they stick with the NHL guys or sort of stick to what the European way is, where they sort of more or less keep the guys from their own leagues, say that they basically have already played in the system, know what the coaches sort of want. So it'll be interesting to see how that ends up there. So now take a look at the centers with Hischier, Suter, Hoffman, and then from the National League, you got Haas, Profilov, you got Almond, and you got Corvi. So once again, another one of these lists where a lot of players from their own home league. Many players, of course, do choose to play on their hometown. Makes a lot of sense. But it does sort of leave a gap, especially in some of the more skilled areas. I don't see much of the National League even comparing to the NHL, and for that matter, even the KHL, the Swedish Elite League, and even the Deutsche Extraliga. Many of these leagues don't really compare, and I don't think the Swiss League is any more than that. So now take a look at the right wings. So with Malgin and Gigetto, you got Ambosch, and you got Holstein, Brunner, and Herzog, all from the National League. So once again, sort of falls off at one point where you lose sort of the winger depth, especially because a lot of the top players are centers, especially in the NHL, and they're also left wingers because most of them are left shots. So I will look for most of these left guys to play on their off wing, play the right wing, and sort of try and balance it out a little bit more, because obviously they aren't the terribly depth team, but it will be interesting to see sort of what happens there, because it will be something to look for, and obviously they kind of need a little bit more depth, especially when you're competing against a team that has 4 lines of depth every night, top all-star players. You kind of need lines going that can play. So if you have one line, it's better than half a line, and half a line. So we'll be curious to see what ends up going on there. But with that, we'll now take a look at the left defenseman with Yossi, Siegenthaler, Spisa. And then from the Swedish Elite League, you got Mueller. And then from the National League, you got Furr. And then for the right defenseman, you have Kukin, Diaz, Weber from the National League. And then you got Untersanger from the National League as well. Moving on to the goalies. Once again, sort of following that National League sort of thing. All 5 goalies are from there. Once again, they want to play in their hometown. So it does make sense. So you got Berra, you got Sen, you got Van Portingon, you got Stefan and Giannoni. So nothing too surprising there. I mean, Berra has been a sort of a staple in the Swiss team for years. Same with Sen. So I don't see too much goaltending wise. It's going to be changing. Of course, there are a lot of there are some different options, but from what's happened in years past, I don't see any newcomers that really threaten the role of either of those two. They've been staples for years, and I don't see them changing. At least not this year. Maybe in 4 years, when Berra and Sen get 4 years older, might leave room for another guy. But as of now, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So now take a look at the lines. So I'm going to take my first guess at line 1, and it does make a lot of sense for these to go. Will be Meyer, Hischier, and Fiala. So this is sort of the only line that will have a shot at contending against some of these bigger teams like Canada, like the US, like even like Russia, Finland, Sweden. I think this line will be pretty much their main source of offense. Although, once again, as I said, I don't think they have the forward depth to contend. I think their defense is shaky as it is, and on their goaltending is sort of meh. In reality, they don't stand much of a shot against some of these bigger teams, but they can definitely contend for what they got. And I think, to be fair, if they can make a semifinal, I think it's an accomplishment worth noting for them. But I don't see them making it that far at all. Looking at the second line, I think Kurashov. You got Kurashov, you got Suter, and you got Niederreiter. So with this line, once again, I think sort of adding on to the top line where you want to try and make as many top lines as possible. I think this line sort of adds towards that. I don't think it's necessarily the fix, but it's something worth in the right direction. So whether or not that line actually gets a lot of time, I think it's more of a defensive line, shutdown kind of guys, where they're going to log quite a few minutes. I think between the 2 top lines, you're going to be looking at about 25, 30 minutes a night for both sides, obviously. It's not even going to be including penalty kill time, power play time, but overall, these top 2 lines are going to be the main sources of this team, offense, defensive wise. So I think as the tournament progresses, these guys will continue to get more and more tired. And obviously, when you rely on one line, if they don't end up producing, you got to worry about something else, because obviously, if you have one line and they're not producing, you got 3 other lines that aren't producing, you're going to have troubles, especially when you're playing a 4-line team like Canada, like the US, like Sweden, and you just don't stand much of a shot. So that will move on to the third line, and this is really where it starts to sort of move away from where these teams sort of go. Obviously, a line like Bershke, Haas, and Malgin does not contend with a line along the lines of like Kane and all these other guys that really sort of just blow them by, especially as a third line sort of a line. Bershke, Haas, and Malgin do not contend at all, and I think if they can get lucky and they can be a shutdown kind of pair, I think it's worth noting, because obviously this line does not compare to pretty much any line that's made up of NHL players. Finland's got 4 lines, Russia's got 4 lines, Canada's 4 lines, US is 4 lines, Sweden's 4 lines, Czechs are 3 lines, Germany's sort of 2 lines, sort of similar to the Swiss team. So you kind of look at that and you kind of can kind of guess and see where it's going. But I think when you don't have four solid lines, and especially in an Olympic type format, I don't think you stand much of a shot. And then we'll look at the fourth line. So with Vermin, Hoffman, and Andrighetto, I don't think this line compares at all to any other line, and I think this will sort of be their downfall. Because once again, you're looking at 30 minutes a night, 25 minutes a night, and then you got to basically give 5 minutes between these two. And I don't think I don't think the Meyer line's going to be able to go 30 minutes a night for 5 straight days, and I don't think the Suter line will be able to go for 25 minutes for 5 straight days. So I think at some point these two lines rather, are going to get tired, and I think you are going to have to start to rely on these two guys. And I think that's where Switzerland will be sort of going towards their demise. But we'll take a look at the defense, and I think with the defense, I think they do have a pretty solid team in terms of their defense. Yossi Kukin, pretty solid top pairing. I'm not going to say that they aren't a top pairing because they definitely are one of the better ones. Yossi, top defenseman. Kukin is sort of top defenseman, but definitely has a little bit of room to grow this year. I would like to see how he does. I think he definitely has the potential to grow. So I think Kukin will be sort of the clear-cut number one alongside Yossi. And then with their second line of Siegenthaler and Diaz. So with this line, once again, sort of following along that idea of shutdown pairings, I think that this line is definitely a pretty solid one. I'm not going to say it's not, because I definitely see the potential for this line. But once again, you kind of start to narrow it down. Looking at a team, it doesn't really line up with, say, a line like Werenski and Jones. It just doesn't. Siegenthaler, Diaz do not compare. And even look at teams like Sweden, Canada, all these teams have far better defensemen. But in general, I think the Swiss team will sort of rely on their defense a little bit more. Obviously, they aren't going to be necessarily a powerhouse, sort of that underdog mentality, and anything can happen from there. We'll look at the third line now with Spiesa and Yannick Weber. So with this line, I think without a doubt they are going to be struggling. I don't see them getting a lot of minutes, and then we sort of bring it back to that minute count where you look for Yossi to give you about 35, give or take, because you're going to have to give these guys, call it 15 and 10. So with this, you start to look towards what the issues are, and then I think when you give Spiesa and Weber 10 minutes a night, I think you do kind of jeopardize your chances. Obviously, not NHL caliber defenseman. Weber used to play. Spiesa is sort of a borderline guy, and he hasn't really found it again. So I see this line as sort of a weakness on the team, and I think it's one that a lot of these top teams will exploit, especially Russia, especially the Czechs. And I would be interested to see if Denmark, obviously they aren't as depth as Switzerland is, but I think with the mentality of the underdog, I could definitely see a team like Denmark upsetting Switzerland, especially punishing some of their depth guys here, and here. But with that, we'll look at the goalies now, and obviously, as I said before, I don't see anything too interesting here. Bear and Sen sort of been a staple for years, and I'd be curious to see if they do go against it, but from what I've seen with Switzerland is that they like to keep their sort of guys, and I don't see them switching up this year. If you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. If you liked it, drop a like. If you really liked it, consider subscribing. Tell all your friends, and leave a comment down below your thoughts on Team Switzerland. Until next time, see ya.